G'day guys and gal. When the Salamanders, Raven Guard and Iron Hands got absolutely turbo blasted, in a bad way, on Istvaan and basically had their legions reduced by up to 95% in size, alongside Ferris and technically Vulcan dying, a lot of people wrote them off as no longer being a part of the Horus Heresy. But if you've read the Horus Heresy series like I am currently doing, holy crap it's taking ages, then you would know that there are quite a lot of full-length novels and numerous short stories that focus solely on the survivors of Istvaan, the Shattered Legions as they are called. And while their lore might not be as exciting as Angron lifting up a Titan's foot or Sanguinius just being Sanguinius, the Shattered Legions have some of the most engaging characters who you root for so hard considering what they've endured. Honestly, the Raven Guard, Iron Hands and Salamanders are some of my favorite legions purely because of how awesome the Shattered Legions were in the Heresy, and that is worth talking about. Before we get started, today is the last day to order from the Majorkill Christmas merch drop if you want a good chance of it arriving in time for Christmas, unless you order express, which should pretty much guarantee it for Chrissy. As for the drop itself, I'm biased, but it's definitely the best so far, featuring 4 unique designs in both singlet and t-shirt form, such as this Flesh is Weak design, quite thematic for the video, as well as the Midnight Clad design, which is actually sold out in t-shirt form, but we still have a handful of singlets. Then there's the Nothing to Lose design, which is metal as fuck, as well as the Sacrifice design, for those of you that like to lament. On top of this, we also have the iconic hoodie V2, featuring the classic clean electric red embroidery on the breast, as well as the minimalist icons of each designs on the sleeve. I know it's getting cold for most of you guys and gals out there, so it's a great time to pick up a new hoodie. To get really fucking merry with this bish, the next 200 orders over $100 Australian in value will also get a free fuckhead Santa hat valued at $20. The sale will continue into next week, but any orders from then on probably won't make it in time for Christmas. So this is it. For those that don't really care about the Christmas deadline, then play on. Link is below. Today we'll go over what happened to the Shattered Legions, discussing the fate of the main groups of survivors from Istvaan, as well as what their overall impact on the Horus Heresy was after their decimation. Let's get into it. The Istvaan Dropsite massacre was a really bad day for the loyalists. They effectively lost 3 legions and 1.5 Primarchs. I count Vulcan as a half loss, as despite him being unkillable and eventually returning to the setting to do some pretty important shit, he spent 90% of the heresy as either Conrad Curse's plaything or as a literal corpse. The legions didn't fare much better, with only the small garrisons left on their homeworlds as well as a handful of lucky survivors making it off-world to continue the war in their own way. The Salamanders lost by far the most amount of their legion. This was due to the Raven Guard staging a breakout led by Corvus, in which a couple thousand Raven Guard warriors were successfully extracted, on top of the initial success of the Raptor project and the Ravens garrison on Deliverance. The Iron Hands also had quite a few survivors due to how tenacious and hard to kill they are. However, the Salamanders got clapped hard. The biggest reason for this was that many of them rallied to Vulcan, and then when Vulcan got a mini nuke dropped on him and then surrounded, a shitload of his sons died in the process. Many other Salamanders were so racked with grief at the betrayal that they just froze or entered a fuck you suicide mode and charged the nearest traitor. The cold logic of the Iron Hands allowed them to avoid this same fate, whilst the Raven Guard rallying to Corvus actually paid off. Regardless, pockets of survivors from each of the 3 legions joined up, jumped in whatever aircraft was available to them, and flew into orbit. It was actually wildly lucky for anyone that went on to survive the massacre, as they had to get through multiple layers of death. First was actually surviving the initial charge against Horus, Mortarion, Fulgrim, and Angron. Then it was surviving getting spit roasted when the Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Wordbearers opened fire from behind. Then it was getting to a Stormbirder and surviving all the anti-air guns that were shooting them out of the sky. Then you had to survive the space battles that were going really poorly for the Loyalists, long enough to reach a ship capable of warp travel. Then that ship had to get to the warp jump point and actually escape. So anyone that actually managed to do this was already a fucking legend in their own right. Before I now make a list of the most famous groups of shattered survivors, the ones that did the cool shit, I want to make a point that I don't actually consider Corvus and the Raven Guard that escaped with him as part of the Shattered Legions. More so, it's the various groups of survivors made up of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard. Corvus was still Legion, just very diminished. The first group was a small but deadly group of elites led by the Salamander Pyre Captain, basically the first captain of the Salamanders, Artellus Numion. This is the guy that made the Vulcan Lives thing a thing. With him, he had a small cadre of Raven Guard, including a Raven Guard Librarian, Iron Hands, and Salamanders. After some successful ambushes against traitor forces, they took upon a mission against the Wordbearers to prevent them from claiming the Fulgurite Spear, a shard of the Emperor's psychic might that had the power to kill a Primarch, notably Vulcan, if used by another Primarch. The traitors wanted to corrupt this power within it and turn it into a weapon against the surviving Loyalist Primarchs, the Loyalists wanted them not to do that. After teaming up with John Grammaticus, Numion and his men fought a bitter guerrilla war against the Wordbearers, and despite killing many more than they lost, the Loyalists were killed one by one, and the Fulgurite was stolen away by John Grammaticus. His mission being to deliver it to Conrad, who would then use it to permanently kill Vulcan. Numion was left to die, bleeding out. But he survived, only to be captured by the Wordbearers, who tortured the shit out of him. Eventually, he was saved by the Ultramarines and brought to Macragge, where he reunited with the 66 Salamanders that had made their way to Macragge also. Vulcan, just having teleported from Conrad's ship, also arrived in Macragge in a less fun way, but was stabbed by John with the Fulgurite, seemingly permanently killing him. Numion and his men decided to take Vulcan to Nocturne to either try give him a proper burial or to resurrect him. They were really hoping on the latter, but Chaos was being a massive asshole and sent demons, Death Guard, and Wordbearers to try stop them. I mean, fuck, even Magnus the Red popped in and said hello to Numion, but more so as an ally because he loved his brother Vulcan rather than an enemy. Eventually, these Salamanders fight through the Ruin Storm and get to Nocturne, where they need to fight another army of traitors before finally their mission is complete. However, after burying Vulcan, the Primarch did not rise. Numion had believed with all of his heart that upon his mission's end, Vulcan would return, so he was shattered. However, he remembered something Magnus said. If he wanted Vulcan to return, he would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. Hence, Numion jumped into a volcano, triggering Vulcan's resurrection. So off the bat, Shattered Legion Group 1 revived Vulcan, who would then go on to save Terra, so not bad. The next group were a ruthless bunch, led by the Iron Hand Shadrach Medusan. Shadrach was ambitious. Dude didn't want to just ambush isolated traitor ships, he wanted to kill all the traitor Primarchs. First, he tried to ambush Horus with a squad of White Scar assassins, however Horus sent other warriors in his stead. Then he got a squad of gunships, the Turbo Blast Mortarion, Horus, and Fulgrim during their meeting, almost killing all three Primarchs. Medusan would then get impersonated by Alpharius in a gambit to rid the Alpha Legion of a large chunk of its loyalist elements, whilst the real Medusan would continue to fight on, having amassed a huge army of Shattered Legionnaires. However, his rage and bitterness would get the better of him, eventually causing him to take on a traitor fleet a lot bigger than his own, which in turn then caused him to get captured and then executed. Damn man, bit of a buzzkill ending to such a badass. Probably the most controversial Shattered Legion force, we now have the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard led by Atticus, who would make up the protagonists of the book Damnation of Pythos, which is widely considered to be the most pointless, skippable Horus Heresy book in the entire series. I actually quite liked it though. Atticus was a force of nature, a literal god of war. Whenever he was present, he seemed more like a Primarch than a Space Marine. He led a vicious guerrilla war against the traitors, especially the Emperor's Children. In one particular engagement, he wiped out a couple Emperor's Children's ships and then set up a fuckload of mines at the warp jump point so that when others came to investigate, they too got destroyed. However, Atticus would find himself lured and stranded on a world called Pythos, which was overrun with horrific animals. Not to mention a bunch of Davenite cultists arrived, who then summoned a hectic demon called Mardale, which also didn't help much. One by one, Atticus's men were killed, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard alike. Eventually, it was only Mardale versus Atticus, and despite Atticus giving it a red-hot go, Mardale killed him. Considering Mardale would throw hands with and nearly beat Sanguinius, this was a great showing from Atticus. However, the whole thing just seems so pointless. After the epilogue, you definitely feel pretty shit and depressed, as it shows how the entire epic battle on Pythos and the sacrifice Atticus had to make to warn the Imperium of Mardale's summoning was just a minor blimp on the radar compared to the Goliath of the Horus Heresy. But the real shattered boys you've been waiting for are none other than the Iron Hands force that also included the Raven Guard Nakonai Sharakin, one of the most badass warriors in the entire heresy, who managed to kill Lucius the Eternal, and also once squared up to Alpharius and was like, "Let's fucking go, bitch." Not to mention he also shot Fulgrim in the head with a sniper rifle, a shot that should have killed him, but didn't, as Slaanesh was full gargling his dick by that point. Nakonai and friends would travel from world to world, completing missions in style. It was they who stole the key to breaking the traitors' communication network. It was they who interrupted Fulgrim's ascension to demonhood, inadvertently saving Perturabra's life in the process, and it was they who claimed the Magna Mater for the Loyalists. The Magna Mater being the blueprint to basically create the Primaris Marines. So Nakonai Sharakin is responsible for low-key saving the galaxy in the current setting. It's actually implied that Nakonai is still alive in the setting, as he froze himself alongside the Magna Mater, with the Loyalists retrieving it and the device Nakonai froze himself in. It's actually currently in Belsarius Claw's flagship. Man, I would really want to see Nikonai in the current setting. If he was to permanently kill Lucius, I would literally jizz my pants. That would be the grudge match of the millennium. Other awesome acts of various other lesser known Shadow Legion forces include when the Iron Hands, led by Ortek Moore, raided a World Eater recruitment world, stole their gene tech, and then blew it up. Then there was another time a Salamander force helped the Imperial Army and Loyalist Titans to reclaim Beta Garmin from the Emperor's Children and Legio Mortis, which was the traitor's most powerful Titan Legion. Then there was the time a small force of Raven Guard were able to basically blockade Barbarous and prevented the Death Guard from receiving more reinforcements for the rest of the Heresy. Not to mention the Iron Hand zombie ship, made up of Tech Heresy Iron Hands, who were actually undead robots and would attack traitor ships, massacring all enemies aboard. The advantage the Shadow Legions had was how scattered and focused they were. Most of them were deep in enemy lines and made up of the most resourceful elite warriors from those legions, as who else could survive the Dropsite massacre? I was impressed with how happy GW was to kill off the Shattered Legion characters. They were all so well written, and you'd think with how decimated the legions were, GW would show mercy, but nope. It actually hurt to read about each and every shattered death, as you could really feel how few of them there were actually left. So overall, did the Shadow Legions actually have an impact? I would say yes. Vulcan's return, the near complete annihilation of the traitor supply routes and reinforcements, forcing Horus to rush to Terra, the thousands and thousands of dead traitor Astartes, the Primaris Marines, and Lucius getting clapped like a dog were all pretty awesome things that the Shadow Legions are responsible for. So let's pay some respect to these guys. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Majorkill Christmas merch. This is the last chance to order to probably get it by Christmas. The next 200 orders over $100 Australian will get a free Fuckhead Santa hat. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more shattered content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.